We, that's Cleviston, Dominique, and I, have decided to read his speech together. I will read part of the message on behalf of my colleagues, past and present, of the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Commonwealth Youth Programme. Cleviston Hunt, a colleague and friend, long-standing friend, will read on behalf of Caribbean youth development practitioners and policymakers. And Dominique Norales will read on behalf of the young people of the Commonwealth, including the countless young leaders whom Henry mentored, counseled, teased, and challenged. His legacy is most visible in them and the work they do to change the world. And it has been wonderful reading their tributes to him online over the last few days. Of course, I have a caveat. Most certainly, I think Henry would have delivered this speech with his inimitable flair, and quite likely with a sly smile and a very loud laugh at certain points where he critiques the status quo and mounts a challenge to our inadequate response to contemporary challenges. I imagine also that many of the remarks that he would have added extempore while he was here to this text will have been enlivened with more than one hilarious anecdote. And I am almost sure perhaps some calypso lyrics of some sort here or there sprinkled through just to help us make the point that we should not allow the academy to be disconnected from the views of the people we serve. Nonetheless, we deliver this on his behalf and in his memory, with expectation that we will not only be challenged by the questions he raises, but will commit to action in response to them. And so Henry begins with his salutations, and of course, in typical Caribbean diplomatic style, he would have recognized our SG and thanked her for the opportunity to be here, our honorable ministers of government, members of the Kaiwa, the CYC, and our Commonwealth Youth Program colleagues, with Henry getting the protocol just right. However, I also think that he probably would have departed from the traditional list to give a hail up to his Year of Youth team and his committee members on the advisory committee, especially the young professionals in whom he took a particular interest, rooting for their success as much as the success of the year. And I think after yesterday, he also would have acknowledged and thanked the speakers of yesterday's plenaries and this morning, Professor Williamson, because I think all we've been talking about decoloniality, disruption, and hope, and taking action would have resonated deeply with him as it was part of his core philosophy. So let me begin. His text is called Re-examining the Notion of Youth Policy and Policy Development Through the Lens of the Current Cultural Context. He says, let's talk about our approach to youth development, youth policy development in the Commonwealth. We talk about youth, peace, and security, yet most of our policies don't address structural violence. We talk about youth economic empowerment, yet most of our policies don't address the underlying structural inequalities contributing to economic marginalization and poverty. We talk about youth empowerment, yet most of our policies don't address issues of social injustice. We talk about youth civic engagement, yet most of our policies don't address the issues of social exclusion. And so he would have been standing here before you today, he says, with a critical question as it relates to youth policy development in the Commonwealth. What are we doing? And I think he would have paused there, maybe with a smile, or maybe just with a really stern and concerned look, looking over his glasses. It's a broad question, yes, but it is also a simple one because it asks us to reconsider our perspectives on youth policy and approach to youth policy development. In the post-truth, critical theory backlash era, reconsideration, re-examination, and reconceptualization are more important than ever if we want to successfully co-create a sustainable and peaceful common future for our world. So in the interest of forging that future, I invite you to spend the next few minutes with me on a journey of inquiry. When he asks, what are we doing? What he's really asking is, are our current conceptualizations of youth policy and approaches to youth policy development, truly serving the needs of our diverse youth population in today's ever changing world? As we embark on this brief journey, I am reminded of the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "There are all too many people who, in some great period of social change, fail to achieve the new mental outlooks that the new situation demands." Youth policies have long been regarded as a crucial component of youth development, but it is time to reevaluate their effectiveness in light of our present socio-political and socio-cultural contexts.
Let's start examining what we mean by youth policy. They are often described as an essential component of the youth development ecology. Indeed, the Commonwealth Youth Program, several practitioners and scholars, CYP 2008, 2007, then SLED 2009, Dan et al. 2014, describe the youth policy as a guiding framework which defines, delineates, and articulates the youth development agenda of a country, municipality, agency, or institution. Several other theorists and commentators contend that comprehensive, integrated, and evidence-based youth policy instruments play a pivotal role in facilitating youth empowerment. Indeed, most of the discourse on youth policy alludes to the objective of empowering young people. But what is youth empowerment? Is it a token reserved for selected young people based on some preconceived notion of eligibility? In the public policy space, it appears the concept of empowerment relies on an army of professionals distributing empowerment to young people. Charles 2021 posits that the classical elite theory of power, Jennings et al. 2006, Jennings 2006, or derivatives of it seem prevalent in the youth development space. Another critical issue for youth policy development is based on Wu, Ramesh, Howlett, and Frickson's 2010 observation that public policy processes are often plagued with irrationality, inconsistencies, and discordance. They opine that the emphasis on policy is usually on the role of public sector officials seeking to navigate the political, technical, and institutional challenges of policy environments. Wu et al. 2010. Do existing youth policy development processes allow for sufficiently robust interrogation of the policy environment? It would seem to me that defining the public policy environment and truly understanding the nuances and complexities of youth experiences are essential elements of the policy development process. As Dietrich von Hover once said, if you board the wrong train, there's no use running along the corridor in the other direction. It is time for us to examine whether we are on the right track. In our world today, we are witnessing an emerging global development paradigm characterized by the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a privileged few. This paradigm is marked by unbridled revisionism, distorting the very concepts of solidarity and pluralism. We must confront this reality and question how our youth policies are influenced by these dynamics. It is not enough to celebrate incremental accomplishments. We must recognize the urgent need for re-examination, even a recalibration. Youth is not a homogeneous construct. It is a diverse tapestry of experiences and aspirations, influenced by social class, intersectionality, and the web of identities that define our young people's livelihoods. Therefore, we must ask ourselves, are we truly defining youth priorities based on these dimensions? Are we comprehending the intricate interplay of social factors that shape the lives of young individuals. It is essential to embrace the nuanced understanding of youth if we are to develop policies that are truly effective and inclusive.
In considering the role of the state in youth policy, we must critically assess whether it acts as a facilitator or a hindrance to the emancipatory needs and priorities of working class youth and those living in marginalized communities. Our approach must shift away from the centralist model where the state sets the policy development process, invites youth participation, and then monopolizes ownership of the policy. We need a more emancipatory and empowering model which embraces youth-led grassroots approach that empowers young people to shape their own destinies and emphasize shared ownership of the policy. While much emphasis has been placed on youth civic engagement, it is time to explore more transformative and grassroots approaches that are grounded in the principles of social justice. Rather than focusing primarily on how we assist young people to navigate the dynamics of the ever evolving sociopolitical context, perhaps youth policies should emphasize solidarity among the diverse populations of youth, the deconstruction of prevailing structural inequalities, and the reconfiguration of the existing power structures. Is youth policy merely an administrative instrument, or should it be an emancipatory political tool? I contend that youth policies must be conceptualized and treated as socio-political instruments to facilitate social justice outcomes for youth development and create more emancipatory environments for youth empowerment. As we come to the end of our exploration, I must reemphasize the urgency of the need to revisit the conceptualizations and purposes of youth policy and the processes of its development. I contend that the efficacy of both deficit based and positive youth development approaches is diminished in prevailing socio-political environments. Perhaps the time is opportune to reintroduce and accentuate the concept of critical consciousness in the youth development discourse and emphasize a social justice approach to youth and policy development. All these questions must drive the emerging global youth development discourse. Indeed, this conversation should take center stage at the Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting in London this September. It is through dialogue and collective action that we can forge a more sustainable and inclusive future. Together, let us challenge the existing paradigms, break free from illusion and contemporary myths, and pave the way for a future where youth policies are transformative, responsive, and rooted in the realities of young people's lives. Thank you, and may our collective efforts lead to a brighter and more inclusive Commonwealth.